Hi, I'm Fred Yeakel, and I'm doing a series of videos with people who actually were involved with the Bill Thomas Cheetahs in 1964, people that raced them, people that worked on them. And with me today is Jerry Entin. He bought the Cheetah that had been raced by Jerry Titus. So maybe, Jerry, you could tell us a little bit about what happened in your background, both before and after.
Okay, well, to start with, the first car I had in road racing was called Yeakel, which was built by a fellow named Max Belchowski. A friend of mine named Jerry Titus was driving the factory race car, which was built by a fellow named Bill Thomas, with help from another fellow named Don Edmonds. And I thought it was a more advanced car and would be better than Yeakel. So I purchased it. It was owned by a fellow who owned a Chevy dealership in a place called Rialto, which is in California, and his name was John Groh. And I took the car and I mostly raced it in what you would call club racing or amateur racing. We would go to places like Santa Barbara or Pomona, or Riverside also allowed club racing. And club racing is where you'd start to learn how to race, and no money or anything, just get experience racing. Our biggest club race was at a place called Santa Barbara, and that was a college town in an area called Goleta, which was the Santa Barbara airport. And it's hard to believe, but they would get approximately 30,000 people out to watch that race, and it was a very fun event. And I also brought the car to the first race they ever had at a racetrack in Las Vegas that was sponsored by the Stardust gambling casino, and they called that the Stardust Raceway. And the car won the first race held at the Stardust Raceway. Do you have any questions you'd like to ask me, Fred?
Well, and then you also ran at the Times Grand Prix and in the that series, right? The US RRC series on the West Coast.
Yes, I did. That was more professional type racing, and the USSRC was mostly made up of Americans racing each other, and usually there were two classes. One was called under 2 liters and the other was called over 2 liters. So 2-liter engines were cars like Lotus 23s or Lotus Elans, different smaller
Porsches.
cars, Porsches. They didn't have to, they weren't really in the class we were in, and they were racing for their own trophies. This car was just when the rear engine evolution had come in. There were cars called Cooper Monacos or Brabham BT8s or Chaparrals, and later McLarens, and those cars seemed superior in handling to these cars. This car was very fast in a straight line and a fun car to drive.
You had not a real pleasant experience at Riverside at the Times Grand Prix.
That's true. The car was making a clunky noise in the last club race I was in, and I took the car to Bill Thomas, to where they built the Cheetahs, and I asked them, did they see anything wrong with this car? It's going clunk clunk. And they checked the car out supposedly, and they said they didn't. But what it was on the suspension link to the right rear, a Heim joint, I guess, was about to break. And in the race, that breaks. On a normal race car, they have a link that if you broke a component point, it would still hold the wheel up straight. On the Cheetahs, they didn't put that link in, and the wheel went under the car, and I slid out in the dirt. But I had also moved over, was going very slow, and the fellow I moved over for was the world driving champion at the time named Jimmy Clark. So he thought after the race he had cut me off and came over to apologize. I said, no, I just pulled over. Part of the car had broke, and that was it.
Well, now, didn't you also run at Laguna Seca shortly after that with the at the Exanimer Grand Prix part of the USRC, or did you just not actually get the car repaired in time?
I think that was before. I think Monterey was before Riverside.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I had run there. Then after I fixed the car, which the body could have been patched up, but I just put on a lightweight body. It was easier, and they didn't cost that much at the time. The whole body configuration cost, I believe, like $300. So to repair it, I don't know what it would have cost, and it would have been, as they say, like Mickey Mouse, like trying to repair it. And a friend of mine was a second unit director on a movie called Spin Out, and he asked me did I want to put my Cheetah, and I also had a McLaren, which I had bought after this car was damaged at the Riverside race, and I had them both in that movie, Spin Out. In spin-out, my car was painted orange.
Okay, then after that you sold it to...
I sold it to one of the mamas and the papas named Denny Doherty, and he converted it for street use. And
that had to be kind of interesting, because I believe you told me that there weren't any VIN numbers on the car or ID numbers. It was just a car sold as a Cheetah.
well, this would have been in like 1965, and I believe at that time you could have gone to your Secretary of State or Department of Motor Vehicles and tell them you had a home-built car, and they would issue you a VIN. Just as now, if you bought a four-wheel machine where you sit side by side, like a Polaris Range or something, some states allow you to have a new VIN for it and claim that it's a street legal machine as long as you have turn signals and the right tires and everything. In those days, I think they were more interested in that you had mufflers on it, and they didn't care if it had racing tires on, or they didn't care if it had windshield wipers or anything like that.
So at that point in time, after you sold it, it became a street car and went through a series of owners in Southern California.
A fella whose family owned hamburger-type restaurants called Tiny Nailers, he bought it off of Denny Doherty after me, and then it was sold, and eventually my car ended up with a fellow named Albert Way in New Jersey, and he's passed away, and now his brother Ron Way has possession of the car, but it hasn't been shown or run. For some reason, Albert Way thought the car should have an aluminum body, which it initially had, and he commissioned a new aluminum body to be made for it.
So that is kind of, in a nutshell, Jerry's experience with the Cheetahs back at the time. And then you went on from there to run a whole different series of cars in the Can-Am series, which was what happened after the USRC. Is that not correct?
Right. The USRC was more amateurs racing for prize money, which wasn't very big, and a place like a proving grounds to work your way up. And the Can-Am series was way more professional. It had Indy drivers, Formula One drivers,
World champion sports car
drivers, yeah.
And the Ferrari factory would send cars over and all that.
Yes.
So anyway, we're just trying to set a background for what these cars were back in the day. So thank you very much.